Hello, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Christine and I like to read dark and disturbing things. I read a lot of horror, but I do dabble in like dark fantasy and just some other genres from time to time. But today, what I have for you is my December 2023 wrap up. So let's check out what I read. So in December, I read 16 books and I participated in Kelsey from Simon Slasher's readathon called Creepin' Peepin' Corny Christmas. I hope I got the name of that one right. If for whatever reason you have not checked out her channel, you totally should, because she is the sweetest, nicest person, and she really was a huge part in making me feel part of the booktube community. And she has the best readathons because she goes all out. She makes all the graphics. You don't, let me just explain. One of my first readathons was where she was a host, and I felt like I never participated in readathons before because I was kind of overwhelmed and I didn't want to let a team down or anything like that. So if you are like considering ever joining a readathon, I highly recommend it. She has a lot of readathons that are non-competitive, and usually the prompts are broad enough that you could really read kind of whatever you want and it would fit into the prompts. It's just very low stakes, low pressure readathons. So please check out her channel. So the readathon that I participated in was kind of like, it was a readathon slash watchathon, or whatever you wanted to do, basically. And you would fit certain prompts and you would find out at the end if you were naughty or nice. Now, I kind of already had an inkling where I would fall, but I still made a spread in my handy dandy journal. So I did a nice page and then I did a naughty page, and I wrote down all of the prompts. And what I did was I just read what I wanted to read anyway. I didn't even really pay that much attention to the prompts, but after I read a book, I would go through the prompts and kind of tally which ones I fit into, and then added it all up at the end. And by 1 point, I was on the naughty list. That was a close call. I almost made the nice list. Oh, can we first appreciate the DuckTales sweatshirt that I got for Christmas? I had to wear it. I absolutely still obsessed with DuckTales. Don't know why. It's got to be the theme song. But anyway, I read quite a few books, but I already did a mid-month check-in. So I'm going to link that down below, and all of the books that I read, I'm going to quickly run through right now and just kind of give you what my thoughts were, just so I'm not repeating myself and so I could spend more time with the books that I haven't talked about yet. So the first book I read was A Cold Place for Dying by Christopher Triana. This is an isolation, snowy, kind of thriller horror where someone goes out into the woods to go hunting, and he comes across this woman who is running for her life. And she says, "Please, you have to help me. I've been kidnapped." And he's like, "Okay, of course I'll help you." And then along comes a guy who's like, "No, that's my wife. She has not been kidnapped and she's mentally unstable." And he is stuck in the middle trying to decide what to do. I gave this one 3.5 stars. I read 2 Christmas smutty books, Groped by the Grinch and Christmas with Krampus, just for funsies and I knew it would fit some of the readathon. There was a wheel of smut. What was I gonna do? You cannot deny the wheel of smut. So I looked at the wheel of smut and I picked a few. There's nothing more to be said about those. I also read Kiss Her Once for Me. This is very out of my genre of books. This is a contemporary romance between 2 females and like a fake dating, fake marriage type scenario. And this one was just okay for me. But I have to say that there have been quite a few people who have commented that are more into this genre that really did like this book. So if this is your thing, please don't even listen to what I say, because it's just not my jam. I then read Snowball, A Christmas Horror Story. This is about an elf on the shelf that just goes wrong. A family brings in an Elf on the Shelf from like a consignment shop, and this thing is like old and pretty raggedy, and ever since they start putting it on the shelf, weird things start happening in the house, and it just goes from there. Oh, I gave Kiss Her Once for Me 3 stars, and Snowball, A Christmas Story 3 stars as well. I read Bunnicula, The Fright Before Christmas, another 3-star book. This is a middle grade book with the Bunnicula and friends characters, and I had read Bunnicula earlier in the year and I gave it 5 stars, so I really wanted to give this one a shot, but it kind of fell flat for me. Then I read The Shuddering by Anya Alborn. This is another isolation, snowy setting book about a group of friends who go out into their parents' cabin and they get snowed in, and they probably would have been fine had they stayed in the house, but there's kind of like some fighting amongst them, and whoa, the sun is coming out. There's some fighting between them and they try to leave. Some of them try to leave and they find that there are creatures living out in the snow. So we have like a creature feature type thing happening. They have to fight to survive, and I thought it was a really fun time. I gave this one 4 stars. I also read Alice in Borderland Volume 3. I've already talked about this series. This is a manga series, and it is also a series on Netflix, and it's a really fun series, but being that I probably won't mention this one anymore just because I will probably continue to read them, but I can't really talk about them at this point in Volume 3. And last from the wrap up, my very quick wrap up, is The Widow of Pale Harbor by Hester Fox. I read this one for Elizabeth Sagewood's book club, and I would say it was a solid story, but nothing really blew me away in any way. I did like all of the nods to Poe stories and Poe poems, but beyond that, it was okay. It was a 3-star. It was honestly kind of forgettable for me, but I didn't have a bad time reading it. All right, on to the ones that I have not talked about. First of all is Candy Cane Kills by Brian McAuley. I was so excited to get this because I read Curse of the Reaper earlier in the year and I had such a good time. That was my first time reading this author. Actually, I think that was his debut book, so obviously that was my first time. And this one is just a shorty novella, but it is a really good time because this is just holiday horror at its best. We have this family that goes to their cabin. I feel like I keep saying the same scenario, but I am very much into that setting for winter. But this family that's kind of struggling, the parents have not been getting along the best, and they decide to go to, they rent out a B&B type situation. They rent out a place for the night because they want to make like some different kind of Christmas memories. They just want to be in a different setting. They're hoping this will bring them together, and they get there and they find out that this town is pretty deserted, and the townspeople said that there was an awful murder that happened in this home, but like 10 years ago. So it was so long ago that they're like, okay, whatever, we're just gonna have a good time. And being a slasher, obviously they are in danger, and there's just some fun holiday kills in here. This one had some pretty well-developed characters considering that this is a slasher, which I really appreciated. We had the main son that was like struggling to accept his sexuality and his feelings towards his best friend. And then we have his sister who was, I forget what physical ailment she has. I want to say maybe juvenile arthritis or something like that, to the point that she cannot really walk very well. So she needs to use like arm crutches and things like that. And this has really put a strain on the family financially as well as emotionally. And she's kind of struggling to deal with feeling like she's this burden in the family. But she was like a really fun character, and I'm glad that this wasn't just like a one-dimensional thing. It wasn't like, oh, and we have a gay character and here's the disabled character. It wasn't like that at all. These characters very much had their own personality. It just happened that they had this other thing going on as well, which I really appreciated because I feel like that is not always the case. Anyway, if you like Christmas carols being sung while people are being slashed, this is for you. This is part of the Killer VHS series that is put out by Shortwave Publishing, and there is another book out as well, the first one, which I do have and Can't wait to read more of these. I totally forgot to mention this is set like in the 80s, 90s. I think this was in the early 90s, and there were a lot of references that I really appreciated. Yeah, it must have been the early 90s. There were a lot of references I really appreciated that were not just thrown in there for no reason, like chatting on AIM, and there's a Tarantino reference in here. So I had a fun time with this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Not because there was anything wrong with it, but it's kind of hard for me to give a slasher 5 stars. It is just, it doesn't have the depth that like my 5 stars would normally have, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. I love this book. Next, I read a Nutcracker retelling called The Kingdom of Sweets by Erika Johansen. This was a book of the month pick, and the only reason how I even heard about this book. And Nutcracker is one of those things that I grew up with. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I know I've seen the play a few times when I was a kid, and I used to watch Nutcracker on Ice when I was a kid, and I just feel like it's kind of just part of my childhood. So I was really excited to get to this. This is about 2 twin girls who, one, on the day that they're born, they have like this godfather that says, you are blessed as light and you are dark. And from that moment on, our main character, who is the dark side, feels this whole book is from her perspective, and she feels like that just kind of set the tone for her entire life about how everyone treats her. Her sister, even though they're twins, is the beautiful one, and she's kind of like the homely one. Everyone loves her sister. Her sister is very popular and social, whereas I should probably know her name. Oh, so the light one is Clara, like from the Nutcracker, and Natasha is the dark one. She just feels like she lives in the shadows, that no one pays attention to her, but she also knows that she's like the smarter one and the one that can see how people really are, because she's just observing people as opposed to being like the center light in their lives. So while her sister has the beauty and all of the prospects in life, she knows that those people just talk to her a certain way because of her beauty or because of her standing in life, as opposed to really caring about her. Well, Natasha kind of has this thing going on with the son of a duke, and they've been messing around at night. He's been sneaking in her bedroom and sneaking out, and she is completely besotted with this guy, but she knows that he doesn't have the same feelings for her, but she is willing to accept what it is, whatever she can get from this guy. If that's attention at night when no one's around, then she is fine to accept that for the time being. Well, it all kind of comes to a head when it is Christmas Eve. So we get back to the Nutcracker part. It's Christmas Eve, and the godfather, who is kind of like this magician. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but he's this sort of magician, and he presents these presents to Clara and Natasha. And to Clara, he presents this beautiful toy ballerina that's like life-size and dances around. And then he gives this like creepy clown to Natasha that she instantly is like, gross, get out of here. He also has this toy Nutcracker that he presents, and these things don't seem to be mechanical at all. They seem to run on magic and have like a life of their own. And one of the godfather's like little helpers says to Natasha, like, you don't want to get involved with this Nutcracker. Trust me. Just stay away from it. It's bad news. They also find out that night that there is going to be an arranged marriage between Clara and the boy that Natasha has been messing around with. And this is like the final straw. Like, she has loved her sister, even though she says she should be really jealous of her. She's not. They still have a very loving relationship until this point is like breaking point. She's like, no, you have everything else. You cannot have this one thing that I have. And she ends up interacting with the Nutcracker and getting sucked into this world of the Sugar Plum Fairy. And this is where things kind of go off the rails. The Sugar Plum Fairy makes this proposal to Natasha that says, I will give you everything you want, but you owe me a favor in the future. And when I call on you, you need to be able to do what I want. And basically what she does is makes it so that when she comes back from this sugar plum fairy world, it is just Natasha that comes back, but in the face and body of Clara. And Natasha is basically gone. This is a pretty interesting tale. I feel like they didn't fully explore a lot of the magical elements or that special world as much as I wanted to. I also felt it was a little weird. Her feelings towards her sister seemed to just change on a dime, and there was like no regrets, nothing. I found that a little bit hard to believe from someone who is supposed to be like not a superficial character. And then I would say the end got really weird. Like the last 20 pages or so, they started bringing in real world events and like putting them into this world, which did not make sense to me. I'm not sure where the author was trying to go with that. And because it was like in like the last 20 pages, it was like, well, what are you doing? You can't fully explore that. So I really did like this dark kind of fairy tale retelling, but I felt like it wasn't done to it had more potential. It didn't quite get there. So for me, this was a 3.5 star. Then I listened to Snow by Ronald Malfi. And this is, I think, my second Ronald Malfi book. I believe the only other Ronald Malfi that I have read, oh no, I read a short story collection, which I don't fully count short story collections. I read They Lurk, which was short stories. And then I read December Park, which is a coming of age that I really liked. I do have quite a few other Ronald Malfis that I want to get to, but this was on Scribd and it had that same feeling that I've been wanting with it's called Snow. This one started off super strong and I was really into it. It is about this man. He's trying to get to his son in time for Christmas. He and his wife have split, and it's alluded to that it's because he has made mistakes in life and it has separated him from his son, and he has not really done his part as a dad to kind of bridge that gap and spend time with his son. So he hasn't seen his son in a long time and he's going there for Christmas. But there's this huge snowstorm and he's on a layover in Chicago when he can't get on his connecting flight. Every flight is canceled. It is a blizzard out there. And he meets this woman in the bar, like while they were waiting to find out if their flight was canceled. And she is also going to the same place. And they end up deciding to rent a vehicle and drive down there, I think to St. Louis, or to go where they needed to go. And they decided to go together because it's a blizzard and she's scared to drive in the snow. They also pick up another elderly couple that was going the same way. So they're all just kind of going on this adventure together and hoping to make it where they need to go. They're about halfway there. So when all of a sudden there is something in the middle of the road that causes our characters to crash their vehicle or kind of skid out of control, and they get out of the car and it's a man. It is like unsurvivable outside right now. They should not even be driving. There's no one on the road. There's no one around. And so they run into this guy and they don't hit him, but they do crash their car trying to avoid him. And this guy is like really out of it. And he says he's looking for his little girl. And they just like, this is really odd. Like, there's no way that this little girl survived. I don't even know how this guy is here. The whole thing is odd. They eventually realize that there's no way that they can drive their vehicle anymore. It's undrivable. They start walking to the nearest town because they had just seen a sign. They get there and it's this little tiny town that's completely abandoned and everything is just weird. This is kind of where the story lost me. Like, the setup was amazing. I loved it. I was invested in the characters. The characters had like natural chemistry. They were, the conversations never felt forced. But we get to this town and things kind of get, I guess, a little cosmic horror-y. There are some scenes in this that I felt like served no purpose and kind of just extended the book out for no reason. And just kind of as I went on, the story just kind of lost me more and more, and I didn't care quite as much. ended up bringing this down to a 3-star for me. So if you're really into winter horror and you're looking for more things to read, I think that might be one to check out, but it just wasn't one of my favorites. I much preferred The Shuddering by Anya Alborn. I then decided to pick up one of my Fear Street books off of my shelf. This is Silent Night by R.L. Stine, and you just have this girl on the cover. I don't think I ever read this one when I was younger. It didn't ring any bells for me, but this is basically about a rich girl who her dad owns the mall, or owns like a department store, and this girl is insufferable. She is like the worst. She's just so mean to everybody. It seems like everybody in this book wants a job, like they're high school students, and she works at the mall, or she works at this department store because daddy owns it, but she never shows up on time. She never does any work. She talks back to her bosses. And then her dad says, hey, we need seasonal help. Can you ask your friends if they want a temporary job? So she's like, starts handpicking people that she kind of likes, or she handpicks this guy she wants to flirt with, even though he has a girlfriend, and then denies other people, like her cousin who really needs money is like, nope, there's no job, sorry. She's just kind of an ass the whole time. And she's making enemies left and right. When things start happening to her, she starts getting packages that are disturbing, and she starts getting scared and wondering who's doing this. There's kind of like a side plot going on where another group of friends decides that they are going to break into the mall overnight and steal everything that they can't afford for Christmas, because they're down on their luck and they want to have a Christmas, so they're going to do that. And both of these things kind of end up clashing. People end up turning up dead. And yeah, I mean, it's a Fear Street book. It was all right. It wasn't, my favorite. It wasn't like a super standout. I really wanted to see this girl have more things happen to her because she was just awful. But I give this 3 out of 5 stars. I'm pretty sure there's like a Silent Night 2 and maybe even a 3. So this character comes back. I know they tried to kind of give her an arc in this story, or a reason why she acts the way she does, but I still wasn't having it. But it was a quick read. All right, I've got 2 more books that I read. One of them is The September House. I don't remember even who wrote this. I listened to this one from my library. I feel like this is a book that people either really love or they don't. This is about a woman like in her 50s or 60s that is living in this house that she purchased with her husband a few years ago, and everything is perfect about this house. This is the first time they've actually owned anything for themselves. They've never had the money to buy a house. She loves this house, but she finds out that every September, this house is basically haunted, and in September, things kind of get out of control. The rest of the year, it's fine. So there's all kinds of spirits, or what she calls pranksters, in the house, but some of them are really helpful. So some of them just kind of yell at night and scream and moan and make it hard to sleep. But she also has like this woman named Erika who is a servant to her and enjoys having that purpose in her life. She's making her food, she's cleaning the house. Sounds pretty nice. Blood drips down the walls, things start moving around. Just September is kind of a hassle. Her husband just wants to get out of there. He wants to move. She does not want to move. And he takes off saying he can't take it anymore. And she's like, oh, whatever. He'll probably be back after September. So she just lives in this house and is doing her thing when her daughter calls and is like, hey, I can't get a hold of dad. I have not been able to get a hold of dad for weeks. I feel like something's wrong. And the mom really tries to tell her, no, don't come. Don't wait till October. She has managed to make it so her daughter hasn't visited her ever since they moved in. The daughter's not having it. She shows up and just things go from there. I was really frustrated with these characters. The daughter just throws temper tantrums and kind of reads like a young child, even though she's in her 30s or 40s. She's pretty annoying. The mom is like the personification of denial and avoidance. And I find those traits very annoying. I'm a very direct person, so if there's a problem, I like to take care of it. I like to address it and move on. But she spends so much energy trying to hide from her daughter the things that are going on in the house. So, in the mornings when everything is moved around, she has to move the furniture all back. She is constantly having to make up lies as to why things have happened. She has zero interest in finding her husband, and her daughter is, calling the police and making police reports and trying to follow up and basically investigate on her own what's happened. And the mom just doesn't want to confront anything. So she spends endless amounts of energy digging up dead bodies to appease like the ghosts or the pranksters in this house. And it was very early on that I'm like, okay, I think I know what's going on. I think I see the twist in this book. And this was probably at like the 25% mark. And as you go on, I'm just waiting because like the majority of this book is me thinking I know this thing and waiting and waiting and waiting for it to play out. And so I found it really annoying to be reading stuff that I knew was going to happen. I will say that this book had a couple twists and I did not see them all coming, but honestly, by the time I got to the end, I did not really care. At first, I was excited when I was like, oh, okay, this twist I like, and this is pretty fun, but then it just went on forever, and I don't know. I was over it by that point. I will say that after that, the characters' personalities completely changed, and they were much more bearable. I'm like, why couldn't we have had this earlier on? This is just a story about, as you go on, you are unburying a lot of family secrets and things that have gone unsaid in this family for a long time. And I do kind of like the family drama aspects of it, but I didn't hate this book, but I didn't love it either. It was just a 3-star for me. And the last book that I read was actually my favorite book of the month, and that is A Child Alone with Strangers by Philip Fracassi. I don't own this, so I'll put a picture up here. I read this, well, I own it on my Kindle, and I will probably be buying a physical copy of this. This is a book that I only knew about from wanting to go further back into the backlog of this author, because I read Gothic this year by Philip Fracassi and I read Boys in the Valley, and they were both 4-star reads for me and I really enjoyed them. I've also read Beneath a Pale Sky a while back, which was a collection of short stories by this author. And I usually don't like short stories, but I liked this collection. So I think that says a lot. This is an author that I feel like has a very old school vibes. I hesitate to compare him to Stephen King, but there are things that remind me of Stephen King when I read his books. And that is that he has great character development. He really takes the time to get us to care about these characters, especially in this book. And there are some phrases he uses that make me think of Stephen King because they're kind of like old school, like things that I'm like, who says that? I don't mean in like an inappropriate way, like it shouldn't be said. They're just phrases that like maybe your dad would say. I don't know. I think Philip Fracassi is about my age or maybe a little bit older. Like he's not as old as Stephen King, but it definitely shows in his writing. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I just hate, everyone wants to compare everything to Stephen King when it comes to horror. But if you read the reviews on this book or other books that he's written, quite a few people make that connection. So moving beyond that, this is a book about a young boy named Henry, and I think he's about 10 years old in this book, and he's really going through it. His life has been rough. We start off this book with a lot of action, getting to know him and his dad, where his mom passed away earlier, so it's just the two of them. He and his dad have an accident right at the beginning of the book where the dad does not live and Henry almost dies and he's in a coma for a long time. And after many, many surgeries, it's like a miracle that he's even alive. And his aunt and uncle take care of him and they love him. Like they've not been able to have children. They absolutely love him. He is their son. And he's just going to school, and it's been about a year when he gets kidnapped. He gets kidnapped and he is taken to this remote cabin in the middle of nowhere by 5 people. they're holding him for ransom because there was some insurance money involved in the accident that he was in earlier. The point of view skips around from Henry to the detective that is investigating this case to the different minds of the different kidnappers, which I found pretty interesting. Henry has had an ability, though, ever since this accident, that he can read the minds of other people if he wants to. So he can kind of shut it out. He's learned to shut it out. He's been through all of these like psychological tests. And if you're thinking something, he can pick up on it. Like usually he'll pick up on it in colors. So if someone's like angry, he can feel that they're angry. And if he really wants to really focus and go into their mind, he can find out what they're angry about. Or so he's able to read the minds of these kidnappers. But he also, when he is being held prisoner in this home, in this little shack in the woods, he's picking up on another presence that is in the woods that is not human, that is not any of these people. And it is this very primal being that he is really connecting with. This story was so good. I think it's over 600 pages, and it is a little bit slower in that I never felt like things weren't happening, but Philip Fracassi really takes the time to get to know each and every character and their kind of backstory and why they are the way they are, because you get so much more out of this if you follow along. So I was never bored. It probably could have been cut down a little bit, maybe 50, 100 pages, but I didn't care. I liked the story enough that I was fine to go along with it. I will say that this has human monsters. It has non-human monsters. This has some cosmic elements to it. It has, it does have some animals involved. So if you're sensitive to that, you may want to, I would say it was not like senseless animal abuse or anything like that, but there are animals that are used in the story and don't all make it. So if that's a trigger warning for you, maybe know about that and skip through those pages. If you are scared of creepy crawly things, body horror, yeah, this one will get to you. I absolutely love human monsters in stories. I think they're the most believable and the scariest monsters that are out there. So I really love a human monster story, but combined with this and such a great character that Henry was, I can't believe that I don't hear more about this book. And even when I look on Goodreads, it did not have that many reviews, which stinks because this book is excellent. And I cannot wait now to like dive through all of Philip Fracassi's backlog and read everything he has out there. I think that he is one of my favorite authors of all time at this point. I know I've only read like 4 things, but I'm really loving his writing. This I gave 4.5 stars, so close to 5 stars. I can't even tell you like a specific thing why I'm not giving it 5 stars, because I feel like that last half star for me is like a gut feeling. And while I really like this story, and this was my favorite so far, I feel like there's more in Philip Fracassi that we just haven't seen yet, and I think we will, and I cannot wait to get my first 5-star read from this author. Whew, I talked a lot. That was everything I read in December, and I felt like it was a pretty good reading month. I will be putting out my top 10 reads of 2023 in my next video, so stay tuned for that. And I love to interact with you guys in the comments. So if you've read any of these, if you have any opinions on these, if you felt differently, if you feel the same, I like to hear your opinions either way. So please leave those down below. And if you don't mind giving this video a thumbs up, I would really appreciate that. I hope everyone has an amazing 2024 reading year, and I cannot wait to get into it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, stay spooky.